Good morning, boys and girls. Today, by way of introductory book, although this is not an introductory book, this is a book for serious people. And unfortunately, it's a book that's gotten a bad reputation because it's been used by many unserious people. And it's been used incorrectly, mostly, except in antiquity. And this book is probably at least, 2,300 years old, 2,500 years old. It's one of the earliest books of humanity. And there's a long tradition that goes from the I Ching to the Tao-Te Ching. And this book is, the title of this is The Book of Change. And in this particular edition, there's many. This is the Taoist I Ching. And this is a work of genius, and one that can be used, and the results will depend on how serious you are about what you're doing. And this particular version was published in 1986, again by our resident genius, among other things, Thomas Clarey. Thomas Clarey was considered very gifted, if not also genius in math, in addition to languages. And they're probably, I don't know, they may be related, at least in his brain. But at any rate, this book, The Book of Change, is one that was used as an oracle. And to use it as an oracle, you must be pretty skilled and pretty clean. Clean in terms of having things that are going to hook you, right? That's true of life in general. You don't want things that are going to hook you, snag your cognition. If there's something you want too much or something you're afraid of or something like that, then that's related to this. When you're using it, you won't get a clean reading. You'll just get it'll get snagged, as it were. So this book you can study for a lifetime, and it has been studied sequentially for many lifetimes in the 2,000 plus years that it's been around. It should be read from front to back first, and then there's another reading method for when you're starting, which is to read each of the pieces of the hexagram, each of the elements of the hexagram across, and then you start to see the structure, which I'm told, though I have never been able to, I'm not a mathematical guy, I'm told the structure of it is similar to a double helix or DNA. And let me just read a little from the intro. This is Thomas Clarey's and this actually is an interesting point, because serious people have wondered aloud whether or not this capacity, the capacities that humans have for language, for agriculture, for architecture, for medicine, and in ancient China, whether or not these were given to them. But anyway, here, let me just read a little bit from the foreword. This volume presents an explanation of the classic I Ching based on the teachings of the Complete Reality School of Taoism. In particular, that stream of the Complete Reality School known as the Clear Serene branch. Taoism, an ancient mystical teaching intimately associated with the development of Proto-Chinese civilization, is believed to have inherited and transmitted the original body of knowledge from which derived the technological, medical, psychological, and mystical arts and sciences of Chinese culture. And then it goes into the histories and the misadventures, as well as the adventures of the I Ching. And then let me read a paragraph from the introduction, because I'm not going to do better than Clarey. Introduction, I Ching. The Book of Change is considered the oldest of the Chinese classics, and has throughout its history commanded unsurpassed prestige and popularity. Containing several layers of text and given numerous levels of interpretation, it has captured continuous attention for well over 2,000 years. We're so ignorant in the West, and we're so oblivious to, it's going to change hopefully with the new world that's coming, because we'll have time, I suppose. We'll have different priorities, hopefully. Okay, it has captured continuous attention for well over 2,000 years. It has been considered a book of fundamental principles by philosophers, politicians, mystics, alchemists, yogins, diviners, sorcerers, and more recently by scientists and mathematicians. That's right, Leibniz was really into this. Newton may have been also. It was well known, and it's mathematically very, very intriguing, although it's very simple also. It was given notice in the West nearly 400 years ago when a Christian missionary in China wrote to the German philosopher-mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Baron von Leibniz about the similarities between the system of binary arithmetic Leibniz was working on and the structure of the ancient Chinese classic. Traditionally, the I Ching is attributed to 4 authors, and I won't get into that, but it goes back 5,000, 3,000, many years. And if you look at it, the whole thing is structured as binary code. And in this book, we don't have an overview, a picture of the whole hexagram and the way, the series of hexagrams, but there are other books that go into more detail about the mathematics. So for example, here's a chord. Can you see that? There's broken lines and there's solid lines. Binary code, going back. So if we think we've invented the binary code, no, I'm afraid not. That was invented many thousands of years ago and used to great benefit back then. So I commend this book, but again, only to serious people. Using it as a consultation tool can be invaluable in a practice. For serious mathematicians, I recommend it. For serious, you get what you get from it, what you put in, but you have to put it in with a clean, good heart for the right reasons. And you must be trying to understand, not to take shortcuts. I guess that's the way to put it. All right. One of my favorite books, by the way. And not just me. It's been that way for thousands of years. Okay. What have you learned?
One thing I've learned is that I was asking that question that physicists are preoccupied with these days. How is there something rather than nothing?
Okay.
And contemplating that for a while, I realized that, or I think that, it's basically the same question as how are there different somethings? And what I mean by that is the difference between two states, like the state a second ago and a state now, is just as miraculous or unexplained as the difference between nothing and something. At least the way I'm thinking about it. Like, how do you get from one state of affairs to a second different state of affairs? Seems to me
well,
this
traditionally,
to be the same
people have associated that with a passage of time. That's some people. Other people look at it in terms of entropy and the second law of thermodynamics, right? That entropy is always increasing. But the whole field of entropy is something I recommend to any young person now, because it's a big mess. Although it seems to me that it's on the brink of a major synthesis, kind of like what Einstein did with relativity. Nothing that he discovered was brand new, but he put it together in a brand new way, and then people could begin to see it. Of course, it took 100 years for people to fully grok it. Even more so for quantum mechanics. But this thing about entropy, the entropy of physicality and the entropy of information, they're closely related to each other. And someone's going to figure out exactly, a new way of looking at that, to where we can generate even more theories about why there is something rather than nothing, or why things change state over what we call time, or why they change state at all. But you're right. When you get down to fundamental physics, which is a fantastic place to go, you hit your head on a miracle. Always. I mean, there's no way around it that I can see. And another question along those lines is, as the Sufis say, the secret protects itself. Now, why would that be? Right? So the answer to your question is, that's a great question. Try and answer it. It'll change. Your answer will change as you learn more. Right? And then you'll also, in learning more, you'll also get a tour of all the different answers people have come up with. Especially in the last 200 years, it's fascinating because our model of the world as a big bang and then the passage of time and the expansion of the universe, which we didn't even have 50 years ago, and I mean, big time expansion, faster than the speed of light. All those questions and answers and all that kind of stuff will come up. And could there be nothing?
That was what I was just about to ask.
Yeah, that's a more of an interesting question. Could there be nothing?
Yeah, I've been asking myself that a lot the past month or so, whether...
Good.
So an interesting thing that David Hawkins said, that David R. Hawkins of the books that you've been referring to in a few videos recently, Christian mystic and psychiatrist, he said, so there's a quote that Christians often use called, "All things are possible to God." And in one of his longer lectures, he says, that's a ridiculous statement because I can think of something that's not possible to God, and that's not God. Meaning, and I take that as nothing. And so I've been thinking about that, and to me it seems right. I'm still digging into it, but I feel like, or what I can tell is...
Keep digging into it. Keep digging into it. Hawkins sometimes, gets a little further than what he knows, and he speculates a bit, right? Which is fine as long as, if you're into that.
Yeah.
He should label it speculation. Can there be nothing without a knower of nothing would be my question. An observer of nothing, or a thinker of nothing. See, these questions don't start to not make sense once you're outside of time and space. Anyway, you'd have to spend a lot of time defining nothing, because we're in, okay. First of all, let me get this across. Time and space are not outside of us. Time and space are inside of us. The universe that we observe out there is, in fact, an internal universe. If you want to talk about in and out, there's no in and out either, right? So in the realm of reality, these things start to fall apart because these are concepts that are human brain-based, time-space-based questions. And it may be, I don't know, you could find this out, is nothing and not nothing, are those also within the realm of the human, forgive me humans, animal consciousness? And can we even speak of those things without, for example, space? Which we're giving up on, but the physicists are giving up on as fundamental. So time, well, Einstein showed that, but both time and space are beginning to be seen for what they are, which is emergent. They're not fundamental. Our brain creates them. Now, if we're interested in reality, and we're going to ask the big questions like, is there nothing? Can there be nothing? Why is there something rather than nothing? Then we have to specify, are we talking about the realm of reality? Or are we talking about the limited human, small, tiny little consciousness, which has time and space and all kinds of other weird things that we make up because they were somewhat adaptive, presumptively, at some part of our evolution. Right? We don't know, for example, that cheetahs, that would just sound too weird, but there's a lot of things that we presume that if we're going to ask real questions, we need to look at our base assumptions, right? And one of our base assumptions is that space exists, and that's incorrect. I mean, the space exists fundamentally, not just in our imagination. And if this may strike people as a little strange, so let me give you an example. You go to bed, you fall asleep, you dream. You dream you're walking across town into a Starbucks. Well, if you walk across town, that's going to require some space. And so you dream the space. But as a neurobiologist, I can tell you there's no space there. That's just something that you dreamt. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So those questions, those big questions like that, here we have to be meticulous in examining our hidden assumptions. And one of our hidden assumptions is that space is, no, one of the mistaken human assumption is that space is fundamental. Right?
Yeah, that's a widespread assumption.
But it's wrong. Just like our physics is going to, I think our physics is in for a real revolution. And the information theory of Shannon, for example, among others, is going to, when these are married, it's going to be glorious. Entropy of physics and the entropy of Shannon's information theory, or information science. Because we still haven't pinned down entropy. Really, we haven't pinned it down. Go ahead.
I said I haven't heard of Shannon's information theory.
Okay, so why don't you do everybody a favor and just pull him up on Wikipedia and read the introductory paragraph. Claude Shannon is someone you need to know.
Should I ask ChatGPT?
Yeah, if it'll give you just an introductory paragraph. Or you could ask Grok. Oh man, these AIs are getting smart. Woo. Woo. By the way, there's no reason not to learn anything anymore, because you can just ask these AIs to, hey, teach me about this. And then it'll say something, it'll give you some term you don't understand or something like that. You say, well, explain this. And then say, well, how does this fit with this? And especially with the latest AI from Open AI at the moment, you'll be amazed. You can just learn anything these days. I mean, on the surface levels.
Claude, this is from ChatGPT 4.0.
Good.
Claude Shannon, 1916 to 2001. So he died at the turn of the century, was an American mathematician, electrical engineer, and cryptographer, widely regarded as the father of information theory. His groundbreaking 1948 paper, A Mathematical Theory of Communication, introduced the concept of quantifying information using binary digits, bits, and established a framework for encoding, transmitting, and decoding information with minimal loss. Shannon's information theory provides key principles such as the entropy measure of information, channel capacity, the maximal rate of error-free data transmission, and efficient coding methods. This theory underpins modern digital communication, data compression, and error correction technologies, revolutionizing fields ranging from telecommunications to computer science and cryptography.
And soon physics. And this book was the first binary code. Right? The one that I introduced you to.
Right, yeah.
So it's been a long time coming, but we're getting somewhere, it looks like. And the AIs will help. Okay. Good.
Okay.
So you need more information theory in general. And then if you're going to ask the big questions like, did the universe begin? Where did it begin? How did it begin? Why is there something rather than nothing? Is there going to be a heat death of the universe? You need to look at your assumptions first, and humans make a lot of assumptions, and they don't realize that they're assumptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Einstein proved that to us in spades.
Yeah.
They assumed that time was absolute. Okay, what else is on your mind?
Well, that actually leads to one model of the universe that I've been playing with, which is in Buddhist praxis, they have a thing called the 18 elements, which is a categorization of all of experience, really, or it's an attempted categorization of experience.
People may not know the word praxis, although it's a very good word. Praxis. Do you want to tell them what it is?
Sure. Here's the definition from Oxford. Praxis is practice as distinguished from theory.
Very good. Praxis. Okay, good. Now, what's the question?
The question is about, I know that you have, to some degree, a Buddhist background with the Nundro work and other studies, and I was wondering, so the 18 elements, or they're called the 18 dhatus, is, just as a brief overview for people for my question, a categorization of all of human experience. So they're broken into roughly the 5 sense faculties and then a mental faculty, which is kind of like concepts, abstract ideas. And
no, not in the context of a sensory. The perception of thought, the perception of thought, which is different than thought itself, the perception of concepts, right? That's different than the thoughts or concepts themselves.
Oh, right. So that was the second part of my explanation. There's 6 types, which pertain to each of the 5 sense faculties and then a mental faculty.
Okay.
And then for each of the 6, there's 3 different things you focus on. There's the sense data, which would be like the sense data of the sense field of visual, like the visual light spectrum that you see.
The reflected photons. Okay, go ahead.
Right. Then there's the sense faculty, which would be they call it like the eye faculty, if we're taking the visual,
the retina
part of this. Yeah. And then there is the sense consciousness, which is like, they call it eye consciousness, which is, I'm still trying to figure out what that is.
It's frontal cortex. It's frontal cortex. So, okay, a photon hits your eyeball, right?
Okay.
Then it hits your retina. And the retina decides, whether it's got color, what the frequency is, or if it's black and white, and whether it has edges or whatever. That occurs at the level of the. No, I'm sorry. The photons just go back there. Then at the level of the occipital cortex back here, you break it up into colors and edges, and so the cones receive color, the rods receive black and white. So that comes into the eye. That's a sensory input, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then back here, the occipital cortex says, oh, that's an edge, or oh, that's a curve, or oh, that's a straight line, or oh, that's a wiggly line, or whatever. So this raw data. Then that goes through a number of different pathways and ends up in the frontal cortex, right? Where you say, oh, that's a stop sign, or oh, that's that's the letter R. Okay, so that would be the third faculty according to this scheme. It's 20th century neurobiology is what it sounds like. When was it written?
The 18 elements? I don't know how old they are.
Probably the 700s, 800s. Yeah, these guys were smart. See, we also assume that, they wear funny costumes and they live in the Himalayas or whatever. They must be primitive. No, they're not primitive. They're the opposite of primitive. So it sounds like they're just doing basic neurobiology right there. Dividing it up
and so they try to...
Go ahead.
Yeah, it tries to make a sensical categorization. So then they have that for the eye, the ear, or hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, and bodily sensations.
It's neurobiology. Neurobiology. And they're ahead of the West because in the West, we don't even talk about the sense faculty of being able to observe thoughts as they occur. So we admit the eyes, we admit the ears, the nose, the tongue, the skin.
Yeah.
But we don't have we don't have a word for that part of our consciousness that's able to observe thoughts. So we need to add that. And then these guys were ahead of that.
Right. So my first question is, well, first of all, it didn't make sense.
What the thunder said. Does that line ring a bell for you? What the thunder said? The four quartets. I think it's the four quartets, T.S. Eliot. We just had this beautiful rolling thunder. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Or it interrupted me. Oops. I just pretend I'm American, so I congratulate myself on everything. Or I'm British. You know, we congratulate ourselves. All right, here we go. All right. So you got that?
Well, yeah, I did get that. My first question is why, or actually, I kind of answered this for myself. I never understood why they separated all of it out, but it started to make sense when I would focus only on one, because they're not necessarily. We like to eat up. I think the Sufis, Idris Shah says this in one of his books, that people try to eat up all of their experience at once, and then they kind of get like indigestion or something, I think maybe is the way he puts it, because they're not capable of doing that. And so when I started looking at what if I just isolate the things I see from the things I hear.
Very good.
And they're not necessarily connected.
Good. That's good.
Yeah. And the connection that you get between them is usually associative rather than, it's not causation when you get down to it. Like when you can hear a horn. Every time that you hit the horn in your car, you hear a horn, and then you associate the two together, and then they feel like it's the same thing. But for example, babies, when they're first born, they don't associate these things together. They're not inherently connected to one another, which is interesting to learn about. But my main question then is, why do the Buddhists, sorry to put it generally, but why do they define this categorization with the 18 elements? Like what are you meant to contemplate?
Well, you're meant to think about it for one. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. We automatically we see someone walking through the grass, and we hear the rustle of the grass, and we see the color of their, the shape and color of their shirt, and we see their shadow, where we could construct a human being there, right?
Yeah.
So we would automatically either construct a scarecrow or a human being. But that process, which has become automatic, confuses things, because we do have all these different sense consciousnesses, and phenomenologically, it is definitely worth separating them out. And so if you close your eyes, and turn the light around, there's just spaciousness, but occasionally there's a sound. There's not an object. There's not anything formed. And so, as with sound, when your eyes are closed, the same thing with visual, and so on and so forth. And people have isolated their senses, and it sensitizes each one of them. That's one of the reasons to do it. Another is, again, there's the assumption. If you hear this and you see this, you automatically associate the two, like you said. But the sound is totally different than both of the writing and the pencil.
Yeah.
And so this is just part of knowing your mind and knowing how it works, and how it, and how it tricks you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been watching TV or something, and somebody's phone rings, and on the show, and you reach for your phone?
Yes.
Imagine if you did that with your understanding of the universe, or the understanding of your understanding of yourself. And we do that. That's a kind of stupid mistake the brain makes. Now, it's not stupid. It's adaptive evolutionarily. But it's
I had an epiphany.
Okay.
Or not an epiphany, but I had a moment like that when I was walking, and somebody was walking ahead of me, and they had squeaky boots on, and we were walking with the same cadence, and I thought it was me doing it. And so I thought I was making all this ruckus. And then I tried to shift. It took me like a good 5-10 seconds to try to figure out that it wasn't me.
Well, it was you, but unconventional thinking, you're going to separate them out. Okay, good.
Right.
Great.
Right.
Good.
And that it wasn't,
So that's a kind of error. That's a common error that the brain makes. And imagine if it was to make it and you were trying to decide who or what you are, or why there's something and rather than nothing, or you're trying to work out some complex mathematics or physics and you project that kind of crap into it, you're not going to get anywhere. So what they're doing is they're thinking, going back to it's Tibetan Buddhist, isn't it? Yeah, those guys are all over science and math.
Yeah. Back to physics. I had another question about this post that you reposted. Liv Boeree did, I think she's a game theorist or something like that. She has a podcast, and she did a podcast with Scott Aronson, and you reposted it for a specific 5-minute portion of it where Scott Aronson proposes the no cloning theorem as a way to distinguish us being humans from AIs for the purpose of the alignment problem or whatever they call it. The no cloning theorem of quantum physics.
We have to program the computers to care about us and to value us.
Right.
And so this is a real problem, and because we're trying to get the AIs to, they call it alignment, but it's not really alignment. We don't want to align them with human values. Good God, look at the mess we're in, right? But we do want them to value human life. So the question is, how do you program that, or how do you do that? And the point is this: is that if there's been decent recent experimentation that seems to indicate quantum tunneling in plants, right? In the photosynthesis, it makes them more efficient. There's been recent decent experimentation with the GPS of birds.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to indicate quantum tunneling. There's a theory by Roger Penrose and this guy named Sam Hamaroff, which I don't particularly buy, but I like the general idea that, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's tunneling, quantum tunneling in the microtubules of the brain. Now, where in the brain, we don't know. Which microtubules, we don't know. Is it microtubules or is it some other, subcellular element in the cell? We don't know. But the point is, if living things utilize quantum mechanics in their day-to-day thinking, and we cannot clone that part of us or any other creature, then perhaps that's a way to teach the AIs to cherish us, because we can't be reproduced, unlike a computer program. Any AI can it's trivial to reproduce it. But a quantum machine is something totally different, because we don't know what state it's in when we're trying to clone it. Is this making sense? I don't know if this is making sense to folks. Okay, with quantum mechanics, you don't have certainty with quantum mechanics. You have quantum uncertainty, the Schrodinger's cat, or the uncertainty principle, etc. Therefore, you cannot clone an exact copy, because you can't reproduce that quantum, let's just call it a wave or curve for now, mathematically. Okay? Mm-hmm. So you can't clone it. Now, you can clone the outside, you can clone the muscles and the bones and the shell, but you can't clone the more essential element. Now, ultimately, does this matter? No, because consciousness is not... Although there could be some way that consciousness is filtered through a quantum tunneling mechanism or something that we have no idea how it works. Right? There's something going on, and these things represent something, although it's not a physical something or a temporal something, it's something. And so I don't want to get too lost in it, but basically the reason I posted it on X is because maybe someone will say, hey, yeah, that's a reasonable thing. I mean, Scott Aronson, that guy is, he's a great guy to listen to. Very conservative. He's a computationalist. He's working on that AI problem. He teaches at the University of Texas, I think, computational complexity or something like that. He's trying to solve the big problems, P equals NP and all that stuff in Austin. So it was a great idea. Is that making sense? We're trying to protect ourselves from the AIs, basically.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but then my question to you or to anybody else who understands this stuff is that wouldn't
it's not that hard to
understand.
Okay, I can make a copy of this bowl. I can make a copy of this stick. I can make a copy of this pad of paper. In principle and in reality, if I really wanted to, I could almost 3D print them.
But I don't think you can. I think the no cloning theorem applies to all physical phenomena, period.
No, it does not. Read the no cloning theorem for folks. You've got a misunderstanding.
Yes, I'm trying to understand that because that.
Yeah, that's the piece of information you're missing. You got to understand the no cloning theorem. Ask the AI for one paragraph on it.
Well, Quantiki, which is the go-to quantum information place, has a quick paragraph.
That already sounds off. Quantiki?
Okay.
You got to really watch out for things like Wikipedia and these others because they're trash. I mean, Wikipedia might be good for telling you when someone was born, and how many times they were married or something like that. But otherwise, it's trash. I mean, they literally have pumped garbage in there on purpose.
What is the no cloning theorem of quantum physics in a few sentences? The no cloning theorem in quantum physics states
slow down,
that it
go
is
slow,
impossible.
so everybody can get it. You don't have to think it.
Sorry. The no cloning theorem in quantum physics states that it is impossible to create an exact copy of an arbitrary, unknown quantum state. This arises because the linearity of quantum mechanics prevents duplicating the full information encoded in a quantum system without disturbing the original state.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A quantum system.
But anything that gets down to the elementary particle level is going to have built in this quantum uncertainty. And so you can't reproduce it.
It doesn't matter though. See, so this stick, right? At the we don't care subatomically what this thing is. It doesn't matter. If we had a stick that was just now, you're not going. That's true. If it has quantum, you're not going to reproduce a quantum probability curve exactly. But it doesn't matter for things that aren't living. Is the hope.
Okay, but the idea is we do care at the subatomic level for living things.
Because that's if our soul or our spirit or our consciousness, we can all agree that it's refined. It's not like muscles and bones, right?
Of course.
So there's a presumption, there's an assumption at the beginning of this whole thing, which is that consciousness is the most subtle or refined process that we know of.
I see.
And that it will involve quantum mechanics at some level. And Aronson's fine with it. I'm fine with it. Roger Penrose is fine with it. Samaroff, for what that's worth. There's a growing school of people who think that it's not only possible, that it's likely. I think it's likely. Why wouldn't we use the most efficient means evolutionarily? I mean, if plants are using it for photosynthesis, we're likely to be using it for something too. Because our brains, last time we talked about how much more efficient our brains are than any computer. That your brain, my brain,
right,
is basically it would take a computer the size of a city block and a nuclear reactor to run that thing. So,
yes.
So we're much more efficient. How is that? Well, we probably use efficient means like the plants that convert solar entropy into higher entropy.
Yeah, this makes a lot more
quantum
sense.
Quantum mechanics is involved in that. Okay. But see, all of this ultimately, it's like we're playing around with the icons on the computer screen. You see what I'm saying? And I love it because it's fun and it's interesting, and you got to do something while you're on this earth. And, you know, it doesn't hurt anybody, and you can, to me, it's just fun. It's be like, I don't know, other people like vintage cars or whatever, or orchids or studying history or something like that. All of those things I like, probably be nice, but the point is that what we need to know, what everyone needs to know first, is that this whole screen, as Hoffman would put it, we're talking about the reflection, the mechanics of a reflection on a mirror. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, it will fail because that's not where the action is at.
Right.
So we project, in case anybody's just joined us, we project a universe, and the nature of that universe is tied to our senses and our concepts and our ability to conceive. Behind this projection, which is akin to the reflection in a mirror, there's something called the realm of reality. Woohoo! Realm of reality. And in the realm of reality, we deal with the real, and in the real, we're not interested in particularly interested. I mean, it's like a decorative permutation. It's just the ornament, right? It's like this world. It's like an ornament. It's like extra beauty, extra fascinating stuff. It's all extra. So that's all. That's the spirit of. Does that make sense? But
yeah,
while we pretend that we're worried about being destroyed by the AIs, right?
Yeah.
Nothing real is going to be destroyed by any AIs, right?
No, of course not.
So we have fun playing around. Well, how can we stop them from doing this and that? How can we teach them to value this, value us? That's entertainment, folks. Okay.
Yes.
Keep going. Let's keep on trucking.
I have a question about the Toltec teaching tradition.
Okay.
And its teachings on reality.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've spoken in a while about our friend Carlos Castañeda and his series of books with Don Juan.
Let me do that real quick. Okay, so when people talk about the Toltec tradition, they're referring usually, at least in the United States, among non-anthropologists or philosophers or whatever, to the work of a guy named Carlos Castañeda and his teacher, Don Juan, and Don Juan's teacher, Don Genaro. Now, they also may be referring to the Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz, a
Ruiz.
Northern Mexican surgeon. Anyway, it's the name was applied from the U.S. basically. I mean, to call it a Toltec tradition, you can do that, but so much of the traditions, the traditional practices, were destroyed, wiped out, assimilated, or otherwise changed when the Catholics came over, and they slaughtered a lot of the Indians, and they lost much of their traditions. Now, there's part of it that was preserved, and that makes sense, and a lot of that was preserved further by the fact that Don Genaro and his teacher said, hey, we got to get this written down. And so they found this UCLA grad student, and they understood what grad students were for, so they had made him write it down. So it's a very ancient. I can't say tradition because there were so many different elements to it, but then it mixed with the Spanish Sufis, and now we have what we have now, which is a very interesting and potent set of preliminary practices.
Right.
What's the question? And so I recommend it, especially to young men or women who have adventure in their blood, because the second book, what is it? A Separate Reality. The second book in the series, and then there's, I'm not going to do these in order, the Fire Within, The Power of Silence, The Eagle's Gift, and so a few others. They have very, very interesting, fascinating, in fact. There's an interesting praxis associated with these traditions as so described. Now, what's your question?
Yeah, A Separate Reality is a little bit more jumbled, and the Journey to Ixtlan is the first one that's more loose.
So Carlos Castañeda wrote maybe about 10 books, of which 6 are really good, and then you got to just not pay attention to the rest unless you're going to be a real student.
Yeah. So my question is about the following. In most other quote-unquote spiritual traditions, Zen, Tibetan Buddhism, the Mahayana specifically, the great vehicle, Christian mysticism, Gnosticism, the Sufis, there are explicit teachings about the unity of being, which is something I'm always investigating.
Tell me what you mean by unity of being. Okay, I'll let you off the hook, because what it does is I immediately associate to the end of the last book, which I don't recommend, by the way, folks. I think it's the end of the last book, or maybe it's the end of the 7th book, where Don Juan has left, and Genaro have gone off to do their serious stuff. They're old men, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Carlos is left alone, and he finds himself lying on his side in the desert, and he sees some little insect or something, and he feels at one with it, right?
Okay.
Does that ring a bell?
I didn't read the last book because you talked about it.
All right, so let's put it this way. Carlos never was quite able to get where he needed to get.
Mm-hmm.
And that may explain it.
Okay.
I mean, but that's not to take away from the books, because the preliminary practices are excellent. Stop the world, the austerity, the courage, the all of the, there's a lot of, I still recommend the books to people of a certain ilk. They were New York Times bestsellers for many, many years. And Carlos got famous and rich, and, unfortunately that kind of undid him. So read the 2nd through the 6th book, if you like. And many folks have found it very inspiring. But I wouldn't go to him for deep truths. He got to unity of, me and the frog or whatever, or one.
Yeah.
But that's he never quite made it where he needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
But it was recommended by some of my teachers, and so I recommend it also. Okay. And it's funny. Boy.
It is pretty funny.
All right. What's next?
I have a couple questions about the book that you introduced in the beginning, the Taoist I Ching.
All right.
So, first of all, there's multiple iterations or types of the I Ching. The one that you're showing is I think that's the same one, the Taoist I Ching.
Yes, as opposed to the
Buddhist
I Ching. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, Cleary's translated a couple different I Ching. There's the Taoist I Ching, the Buddhist I Ching.
Yeah, so the way it works is, okay, so the I Ching itself just started out as a binary mathematical script. And then commentaries arose. And then you have commentaries from way back, from legendary kings, 3,000 years before Christ, as legend has it. Or you have contemporary commentaries by people like Louis Ming, who I think may have been Louis Ming.
Yeah, Louis Ming.
Let me read the back cover real quick. Well, why don't you read the back cover? That's better.
Well, I don't know if mine is the same as yours. I have a newer edition. But
Is it written by Clary? Just read the first paragraph. Read the first paragraph.
The I Ching, or Book of Change, is considered the oldest of the Chinese classics and has throughout history commanded unsurpassed prestige and popularity. Containing several layers of text and given numerous levels of interpretation, it has captured continuous attention for well over 2,000 years. It has been considered a book of fundamental principles by philosophers, politicians, mystics, alchemists, yogins, diviners, sorcerers, and more recently by scientists and mathematicians. The first part of the present volume is the text of the I Ching proper, the 64 hexagrams.
That's fine. That's good. All right, so
okay.
Now what was the question?
My question is, after a beginner has acquainted themselves with the text, so they've read through it, and then, like you said, Cleary actually recommends multiple spaced readings through the text.
Let me say something about that.
Structure.
People imagine they can read things once and get them. Frankly, folks, it's not true, and it's obviously not true if you just pay attention to whatever it is. I remember when I was a fellow in cardiology and neurobiology, and I had to read these, and some people will know what I'm talking about, these papers on calcium ion channels and propagation of action potentials and understanding the basics of membrane physiology. And the grad student that I was working with, the mentor or whatever, gave me a paper to read, and I read it, and I go, man, that was a tough paper, whatever. I said, I'm going to have to read that again. He says, of course you're going to have to read it again. I had read it 3 times. If you really want knowledge as part of you, you've got to do it repeatedly. Our brains are like that. You see what I'm saying? So this is why constancy is so important. If you just go through it once, like I'm learning this from logarithms. I studied logarithms once in my life, right? And I passed the course. But now that I need it again, I don't have it because unlike other things, I didn't repeat it over and over and over. I mean, I have a general idea of what they are and how they work, but I don't really, do you see what I'm saying? So anything that's worth reading for information, for knowledge, is worth rereading. You see, I'm not trying to be a fanatic about it, but I'm just saying it's a neurobiological fact that some things take repeated readings in order to grok. All right? And this is one of them. And even some proverbs, you have to revisit them later, and then they open up new facets. And a bunch of wisdom's like that. So you read it once in your 20s, then or 3 times in your 20s, and you read it again in your 30s, and then maybe you revisit it in your 50s once, and then you go, oh my God, I didn't even see that. That's just the way it is what I'm saying. And I think that's important for people to know. Don't feel bad about reading something twice or 3 times, especially if it's good. Okay? Yes. I'm sorry, I got off the track because that's an important point.
No, it is, and I
popular.
suffer from.
Yeah, it's not popular point, but it's the truth.
Yeah, agreed. So, after acquainting oneself with the structure and flow of the book, as Cleary puts it, through repeated readings, he presents a few different methods of using the I Ching for, as you mentioned in the beginning, consultation purposes. So there's an appendices in the back, which is really short. It's just a couple pages, 3.5 pages. And he has two main methods, and one of them has two sub-methods. And my first question was about the difference between the two main methods. One is, he calls it using the Taoist I Ching, which is where you go through a sort of more specific analysis, and you read a situation and you construct the hexagrams based on the binary code, and then you perform your reading. And the other one seems a bit more, it's called consulting the I Ching, and it's a method with a few pennies, and you keep throwing the pennies to create your hexagram to read for a situation.
Yeah,
and so my first question is,
go ahead.
My first question is, what's the difference between the seemingly more specific and the pennies method, and why would you use one versus the other?
All right, let me just do this very briefly. I bring this book up with hesitation. That's why it wasn't the first book that I brought up, because people have a tendency to try and use it to tell the future. Now, it can certainly help you understand what might be coming. It can certainly broaden your thinking about a given problem. It can help you. It's like in my life, I'm a psychiatrist as well as a neurobiologist. Now, in my life, I only run into a few things that are truly works of genius with regard to increasing brain capacity. One of them is de Bono's works on that matter, Edward de Bono. The other one is the I Ching, and another one is the Avatamsaka. But so, let's say there's a problem. Let's say you're trying to decide whether to go to grad school or go into a trade. That's a difficult decision. Now, you know that you're biased because you were raised by college-educated people, and you were always told that college was better. So you know that you have bias in your mind. And you know that your friends are going to look down on you or whatever, but there's still the possibility that, hey, maybe you'll be successful, or maybe you'll be one of these people that learns how to do HVAC, or learns how to do electricity or tiles laying or some other artisan kind of thing, and you're trying to think about it, but you can't because your mind's too noisy. So you get a reading from the I Ching. And from that, you think, oh, well, this is what could go wrong at this level. This is what could go right at that level. This is what could go wrong at the next level. This is something that oversees both of those. That's the first hexagram, for example. Then you move up to the next hexagram, and then you have something that subsumes all of that. Oh, this is my life trajectory. Or this is the context of me and my family, or me and my community, or whatever. It's essentially endless, and what it's used to do, it's very useful for lateral thinking. So what this book does is it helps you see things from different angles and recognize pitfalls and opportunities that you hadn't seen before. So that's called consulting the I Ching. Now, there's another way to consult the I Ching where you go in, you pay your $20, and you go in and you see the fortune teller, right? And she gives you some yarrow sticks and you pull them out. And she says, oh, I see a handsome young man in your future, that kind of thing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
Believe it or not, that was kind of that was a little bit of sarcasm, right? But the thing is, for a thoughtful woman or man, there is truth because of the use of or the laws of synchronicity. If one is in the proper state, one can divine. So to use it for divination is usually not recommended. But if you are a master of yourself and of the text, it can be used for as an oracle also. But that's not as great as usefulness. And I hesitate to even talk about that because people go off and they're half-baked. And they think, oh, yeah, all right, I don't want to be a sour old man. And it's fun. I mean, there's you can have fun with it, like a Ouija board or something. But it's a serious tool for thinking people. That's why it's been around this long.
Okay.
All right. Does that answer it more or less?
That does help out. I'm curious if I
also you have to. Yeah, the question has to be asked in a certain way. It can't be too dirty, and the whole. You can't. It's a huge topic. You could spend. Actually, somebody should do this. They should get a doctorate in this. Yeah, it'd be a service to everybody else. But again, to understand it, though, they'd have to be Taoists. I mean, real Taoists. And if they were real Taoists, what use would they have for the doctorate? So here we are.
Okay, so for your example, I've wanted to do that, but so you ask it a question. Like I wanted to do it with, you pick a subject and object. The subject is, quote, you or the person you're reading for. One of the ways you can do
it. Give me an example, and let's talk about an example.
Yeah, so I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it for me and my job.
Okay.
And then, so do you ask when? I haven't tried out yet. Do you ask a question, or the way Cleary presents it is you have a subject and object, so me and my job, and then you construct the hexagrams, or you do the pennies method.
That's the same thing. Well, it's not the same thing. The yarrow sticks or the pennies introduce an element of chance. Okay. Now.
Okay.
So we'll call that the method that introduces chance. In a just straight on sober contemplation, you go, well, is your job characterized by conflict, harmony, progress, regression, great gain, great loss, right? Or and then you consult the trigrams and you look at the relationship of the different the lines.
Yeah.
And then you see how they relate to each other. And so let's say you do one with so let's say conflict is one, and great advancement is another, and other one is utter failure. That's not the name of it, but okay, all right. Now you look at these three hexagrams, and then you look at the components of them. Now this is a Taoist I Ching, so this is related to your practice, right? And there's an art associated with it. It's art, sincerity, and no magical thinking.
Right. So my difficulty with that is like I could read for my job. I could definitely read conflict for it. I could definitely read harmony for it. I could definitely read.
Okay, so let's take conflict. All right, let's say conflict. And you have a hexagram that's related to conflict. Now flip it upside down, and what do you get? And how do things change? In other words, you have to work with it. There's no if you're starting to use formula beyond a certain point, you're missing it.
I see. Okay.
All right. So I guess that's really important. There's no fixed formula. It depends. There's somewhere you do a trigram and you do its complement, or you do trigrams and you read it from top to bottom or from bottom to top. Right? Or in the case of the moving lines, you move them from, the moving line switch. And you could do mixtures of these. And now we're talking about more advanced use, but yeah, you've got a lifetime. And it's worth doing. Definitely worth doing, I'd say.
Okay.
Learning. Because then when you need it, it's there. It's like the 6 thinking hats of De Bono. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I should probably teach people about it while I'm here because it's very valuable.
De Bono's 6 thinking hats?
Yeah, I'll do it later. Let's do it later. Sometime.
Okay.
All right. What else do we have going here? Any other questions before we stop?
I have tons of questions.
All right, Let's go.
No, I think most of them are contemplations, honestly. So.
All right. Good. Anything else before we stop then?
No, that's it. That's it for now.
Adiós, compadre. Que te vaya bien.
Adiós. Thank you.